Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Nick Raithel. Thanks for being on the show, Nick.
Thank you very much for having me, Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I don't think I've had anybody on the show that's talked about this topic before, and that can help us as syndicators the way that Nick can. But he is the creator of the 7-hour book, a proven system allowing any real estate investor to get their own professionally published book while spending only 7 hours of their time on it. He is on a mission to help investors and others in real estate finally get the recognition they deserve and gain the credibility to do bigger real estate investment deals. So I know anytime I have thought about, like, people have said, well, you're going to write a book. And I'm like, what? I don't know when I'm going to have time to do that. So this is going to be a great show. I know Nick's going to help us to think through that. So I know a lot of the listeners who are working on branding and building their brand, their business, they would all like to have a book. But it's always that thing of, well, wait a minute, maybe next year or 2 years from now, because I know it's going to consume so much time. So Nick, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for your time and being on the show. Give the listeners a little more about who you are, and let's jump in.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I am the creator of the 7-hour book. And the 7-hour book really is a system that allows any syndicator or other person involved in real estate investing to get their own professionally published book in the span of just 7 hours of their time, 7 one-hour sessions over Zoom, where they're talking to my team and I and helping to really get the book out of their head, eliminating as well the issue of time being a factor that prevents people, as you were saying, Whitney, from doing a book and getting themselves out there and establishing their footprint in the market as syndicators.
Nice. So I guess maybe you and I could talk about, why having a book could be important or, is helpful. And then I'd love for us to go into, why the system is so it makes the time component not an issue anymore, and how we can go through this process. So could you elaborate a little bit on, how does a book help us as a syndicator or operator?
Sure. So a book helps people as syndicators and as operators by, on one level, immediately allowing them to stand out in a field that, as you probably know, Whitney, and your audience too, is becoming increasingly crowded. I mean, it's no secret today, even if you just look on iTunes, that there are countless people coming out. There's probably more actually launching as we're recording this, with podcasts, and in many cases, specifically, multifamily focused podcasts. Multifamily becoming kind of the hot topic within real estate investing. So in a increasingly crowded field like that, where everyone's focused on multifamily or even fix and flips, and how do you fund those? A book comes in as a way to profoundly position yourself and to stand out and show that, you know what, I'm not just someone who woke up yesterday or even this morning and decided that I want to start doing multifamily syndications. I've actually been in the game. Or if you are just starting off, I have the team behind me and the credibility behind me to successfully raise capital and to, when you're talking to investors, show them that you are the steady hands, if you will, figuratively speaking, the steady hands to take their capital and to truly put it to the highest and best possible use, delivering quality returns for them.
Yeah. So, where have you seen, like in our industry, I know you're working with other operators, other real estate investors and helping them create, books for them. Where have you seen it be most beneficial to them, or what instances?
Sure. Well, I think that one of the primary ones is, of course, multifamily syndication, primarily on that because the deals are so complex and the amount of capital that's needed is so great that people really, you and your audience, again, probably know this, people really want to get to know you in most cases before they're going to hand over $50,000, $100,000 or more to put into your investor pool when you are raising capital like that. So we're finding that a lot of multifamily syndicators really understand the need for this and end up benefiting from it. I think beyond that, fix and flippers too can also benefit from this. We've worked with a number of them just because they're doing such a high volume of transactions that they need to keep funding it and they need to draw on capital sources. And a book helps them in those cases too.
So what about the length of the book? If we're thinking about, okay, I'm going to contact Nick. I would love to write a book. How much thought, and time needs to go into it? Let's say before even that first session, and I'd love to get, thinking about, how long this book's going to be and things like that. But what needs to happen even say before our first session together?
Well, the main thing that needs to happen before any of this is to take a moment to stop and reflect on whether a book really is the best thing for you. And that may sound like blasphemy considering all we're saying about the importance to having a book, but really in some cases, you may take a step back and realize that of all the possible channels out there and all the possible marketing vehicles, a book is not actually the best one for you. Maybe what you need to do, and this again is going to sound blasphemous with the discussion we've been having about all the podcasts that are launching, specifically focused on REI, but maybe you've got the right angle and you're targeting the right segment within everyone interested in multifamily that you actually should launch a podcast. Or maybe you should just run more Facebook ads. Or maybe you should work the scene at more RIA meetings. Maybe any of those or other channels are what you should actually do instead of writing a book. So I would say that anyone listening to this, before they even consider a book specifically, should look at everything that's available to them and everything they could be doing and determine what the best one or ones, plural, are. And then from there, if a book rises to the top and truly does emerge as the best thing that they see for establishing that credibility and for getting themselves out there in a better position to raise capital, then begin to walk down that path toward creating a book and potentially working with a group like ours.
What about the length of the book? I know a lot of people are thinking, well, I don't even know what I put in the book, or how much do we put in the book, or do I, would I be afraid I might put too much, or, how long should the book be, and how do we think about what we want to write?
Sure. On the length, it needs to be long enough to essentially pass what we might term the laugh test. So the laugh test being that if you look at it, it can't be so small and so flimsy that it makes people almost want to laugh, in a nice way, of course. And I think that to give your listeners a little bit more clarity on how long is long enough to pass the laugh test, we're finding that it's usually about 120 at the minimum, up to about 170, maybe 200 pages. It can't be so long that it just seems like, it almost seems like a religious text, how long some of those religious books are, or a Harry Potter novel in more contemporary terms. So it can't be too long that it's overwhelming like that. But at the same time, again, it can't be so short that it just seems like almost an ebook, or a short pamphlet. We do help people with ebooks, putting it into Kindle format, but it can't be so short that it seems like something you could just download quickly off of a website and not take seriously. In terms of the other part of your question there, what to write about, and specifically topics, we typically break ours down into a set of principles. So we're very big on this idea of principles because it makes it easier to structure the book and to create a skeleton framework for the book, which then allows not only us to do the 7-hour calls very easily, but also for the book to have an order and a structure that people who are reading it can follow much easier. So to give you a quick example of that, the way we might structure it would be a set of 5 core principles, main ideas, concepts, whatever you want to call them, that illustrate to people reading the book the author's investing philosophy or how they approach deals. So you might have one of the principles being what you look for in a good deal, another one being how you run the numbers, the third one being how you structure the fees in the deal, one after that being, for example, how investors are communicated with, and maybe another one after that talking about how you ultimately dispose of the asset once you've reached that 5-year maturity period or you're ready to kind of cash out. And then to bookend each of those, so you have the 5 core principles, main ideas for the book. Then to bookend that, at the beginning you have an intro chapter or section talking about your background. really introducing investors who are reading it, passive investors, to who you are and humanizing yourself in their eyes. And then you close it out at the end after the principles or ideas with a conclusion section, bringing things to a natural conclusion, and then also offering a next step, which might be to get in contact with you or join your investor database.
Nice. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you see people having, even, with trying to write a book through your system, which seems to simplify it greatly. But what are some of the most challenges or biggest challenges that people have?
I think one of the biggest challenges is self-belief. I know that might sound a little bit unusual, but sometimes people just don't believe that they have a story worth telling, or they get hung up on the idea of the idea. That being that they need a groundbreaking original idea for a book, that they need to be writing the next Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in the sense that of how groundbreaking that book was in its ideas. They come away thinking that, if I'm ever going to write a book, I need to have an idea that original. When the fact of the matter is you don't. Whether you're using the idea we just went over just now with the 5 principles, teaching investors who you are and how you approach deals, something that simple, or even drawing in, if you're coming from a coaching background, drawing in stories of people you've worked with and helped in coaching and letting that be the material for the book. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can figuratively skin the cat here without having to come up with a strikingly bold original idea. So don't get hung up, if you are going to go the book route, don't get hung up on thinking that you need a groundbreakingly, staggeringly original idea.
Yeah, I could see, even just having a book, I can see building, it can build yourself so much credibility. People see you as this author. They see you, has written a book. There's this assumed credibility, is this assumed, expert. You're an assumed expert by most because you've written a book.
Well, the funny part with that too is that for better or for worse, sometimes people don't even read your book, which is a little bit of a compliment and also an insult at the same time, because it's like, on the one hand, you put all this time and effort and energy into it, and they're not even going to read it. But then on the other hand, just having this thing is basically a business card, as I like to say, business card people don't throw away. It immediately, like you're saying, Whitney, gives you that aura of credibility. Everyone else at the RIA meeting is coming and they're handing out business cards to everyone who's at the RIA, but you come in there not only with your business cards, but also with a book or copies of your book that you can hand to people. And that just instantly sets you apart.
Love it. No, that's awesome. And so tell me about the editing process.
Sure. The editing process, the way that we approach it is that we're creating the sections of the book as we do the 7 calls. And with that, we will create a section after one of the calls, and then we'll post it into Google Docs and leave it in what we call open edits. And open edits being a period of a fixed amount of time where we post it into that Google Docs sheet. And if the person we're working with wants to come in there and recommend changes, they can. But we set a specific window, a specific cap on that time. So they have, let's say, a week or 2 weeks to go in there. If they want to recommend any changes, they can, but they don't have to. And what that does is that prevents people from becoming perfectionists over every single line, every single passage in a particular chapter. And it's like, okay, you have a set amount of time, you have a deadline for that section. And once that deadline is passed, we're moving on. We're not letting the book get caught up in long delays and nitpicking over things. That being said, though, we do have a final review at the end once everything is completely done, where people can then go back, and if they've had what I like to call shower moments, where you're taking a shower or you're washing the dishes and you realize, you know what, eureka, this should go in the book. That's where that comes in the final review. They can come back and put those ideas they've thought of after the fact into the book to ensure it really is up to their standards and what they want it to be.
I like that. And I would need that deadline personally. I would tend to be the perfectionist, or just really just look at every word and think about how it's going to be read and overanalyze and eventually not get it done probably. And so I can see that deadline being helpful for even someone like myself. That done is better than perfect, right? Or not getting it done. So, tell me about, I know a lot of people are thinking about, oh, well, I really want it to be a bestseller. Is that something we should be concerned about?
In nearly all the cases, no, it really isn't. The reason for that is multifold. One part of that being that bestseller itself as a label can be very, very misleading. Part of that is the fact that Amazon, if you really look at it, Amazon.com, which is where nearly all books need to be just for visibility purposes, it's a site with an infinite number of categories, particularly within the book section. New categories even being created as we're recording this. So if you go very, very deep into a particular category, it could be that your book is the only one in that category, or the only book that's come out in the last year among, let's say, 3 or 5 others. So if your book, in that case, is the only one that's come out recently, and it sells more than a few copies, it can instantly be a, quote, bestseller within that category. So that would be one way that you could hack the bestseller status. Another one would be if your book, within, let's say, the first 24 hours or even the first week, gets flooded with orders, which you could set up also with making your book free for a limited time. That would also cause your book to rise to the top as a bestseller book, when it's by no means, and this is no insult to your book, but it's by no means one that's selling millions upon millions, like the latest John Grisham novel or the latest true New York Times bestseller. So that would be one reason why the bestseller label is not necessarily something we should aspire toward. I think the other reason for that too is that if you look at the New York Times, the true bestsellers in that sense, they're marketed toward a very broad audience. And for our purposes here with syndications and for real estate investing, our audience is much more refined and much more niche than those mass market titles. So if you are going to reach the mass market, you're going to have to dilute and to broaden your message so much so that it's essentially going to nullify the book and to really negate your purposes for writing it and not cause it to have the maximum impact that you're striving for.
Yeah. So in our business, or being an operator, I could see that, having a book like that being more of what you said earlier, like that business card, and, being that thing with maybe my face or my logo or brand, my name on their coffee table for a few weeks. Maybe they're reading through it, looking through it, maybe their friends come into the house and they pick up the book. Hey, what's this? And then it's a talking point, that type of thing, as opposed to focusing on a bestseller, being a bestseller. But, is this something we should plan to sell or to give away? How do we look at that?
You can really do both. I personally think, and we found in the majority of the cases, that it is best just to give it away so as to reach the greatest number of people and to truly build your pool of investors. At the same time, though, there is ample evidence out there, ample case studies of people who create this book, and then it actually can become, interestingly, another stream of revenue for them. I know that, I forget his name, but the author of Crushing It, who wrote a brilliant book on apartments, I believe it's Brian is the first name. I can't remember the last name, but it's an excellent book. I've heard that he is making at least a couple thousand per month just on that book alone, as a very, very plausible revenue stream. We certainly have a number of clients with the 7-hour book who are certainly profiting, not necessarily as much as their real estate investments, but the book is still a good stream of income. Maybe if nothing else, paying for some dry cleaning and some restaurant outings each month. But it certainly can work if you are selling it.
Yes, and Brian, his last name's left me. I'm in a mastermind with him, and he is, yeah, he's done great with that book, and I've heard a lot of people talking about that book as well. Crushing It in Apartments, I think it's the name of it. Crushing It in Apartments. It's a black and red label. I can remember it, but yeah, I've heard lots of great things about that book. It's neat you bring that up. But what about Audible? Should we think about going the Audible route as well?
I think Audible can certainly be plausible. I've heard it said, I think it was even on the Audible website, that listening is the new reading, and I can see a little bit of a case for that. At the same time, though, the thing about Audible is that while Audible is easier to consume, you can't touch it and you can't see it with your eyes. And we still live in a society where people do, for the most part, believe what they can actually see with their eyes, and even more than that, touch with their hands. So if you have a physical book, that's going to leave a much deeper impression on them than something they're just hearing and that they can't actually see or to touch. So I think that certainly you can go in the Audible direction, and Audible can be a component, an expansion of your book. But if you are going to go the book route, start with something physical and tangible that people can touch and to, as you were saying, Whitney, put on their coffee table even. And that's going to be a good platform to start from to then expand in other directions with Audible or even with video content that is exclusively tied to the book. So you get the book and then you get, let's say, a URL that gives them access to a set of exclusive videos on your website, which of course they opt in for with an email address. So you get that email address added to your investor database, and it further helps to build and refine the lead.
Nice. So what kind of investment should we be thinking about for, creating a book like this? Or is there a window of, of a certain amount to, creating this kind of book to creating a better book, or, how does that work?
It really does depend on the individual investor we're working with and what their goals are for the book. If you're just wanting a basic book, that's going to require a certain amount of time and commitment, but it really is the kind of thing that we're looking at for the most part on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. And Nick, what else about, creating this book and your plan, or the 7-hour book, do we need to know that I haven't asked you?
Well, I think I do want to restress reiterate the notion of thinking really about whether a book is the best thing for you of all the channels, because anyone can hear the idea of book on a podcast, worthwhile podcast like this one, and get kind of book mania, book, get fixated on that idea. But really just the importance of taking a step back, understanding why, of all the things out there that you could do, why a book would make the most sense, and pursuing that. And then also just reiterating that idea of trusting yourself, trusting the value of your ideas, and believing that you have what it takes if you want to go in the book direction to create a book that people are going to respect and to read and to take seriously. And then going a step further beyond that, from the standpoint of believing in the value of your ideas, also believing in your own ability if you are able to do this yourself. We have conversations a considerable amount of time with people where we find that, they actually can do the book themselves. And it's actually a great conversation to have, because we realize with them that, they just need to incorporate philosophies from The One Thing, great book, Gary Keller, Jay Papasan, the philosophies of time blocking, creating their bunker, and carving out the space so that they can take time on their own to write the book, let's say doing an hour every Saturday. Every single Saturday they lock themselves away, the book gets written. Or maybe every Sunday, the kids and the wife go out to a museum or to some other outing for a few hours, and during that time they're writing that book. And lo and behold, the book gets written, and often a lot faster than they thought it would. So really having that faith in your ideas, in your own capability. And if for some reason you find that time is still an obstacle, then it might make sense to pursue something like what we're coming from.
Wow. Nick, what's the one thing that's contributed to your success?
I would say an ability to think open-mindedly and to realize that I certainly do not have all the answers by any means, and to really be in perpetual learning mode. Listening to podcasts like this one, exposing myself to the ideas of authors in other mediums, other platforms, and to really just be as, I forget who it was, it might have been Newton or Edison. I think actually it was Edison said, being a sponge in the sense of just sponging up ideas and concepts and a perpetual learner. I think that's really contributed.
And how do you like to give back?
I don't really like to give back. Well, I'm very big on Wounded Warrior. I love that charity. I also believe just in the importance of giving back in small ways on a daily basis. And that can be everything from, if you go to the grocery store, for example, buying extra cans of tuna or other valuable packaged foods and just handing them out casually to people you might see on the street who clearly have not had something to eat or clearly are down on their luck. I think that of all the things, it certainly is important to give away money to charity, but at the same time, I think that giving food is very important, just because food is something that you know for a fact that they can't go and spend that on liquor or on other harmful things to the body. So I think that food also is important, I think, to give away with food banks and other things, because there are a lot of things that you can cheat and you can kind of hack your way through, but hunger is something you really can't hack. The same thing goes with sleep. Hunger, sleep, of course, hydration. Those are all vital human needs that you really can't hack. And that once you go without them for a certain amount of time, your judgment and your ability to function as a human being is just profoundly out of whack. And that's going to impact your judgment and your ability to make the kind of decisions that are going to help you to get out of a slump. It's going to make that much more difficult. So I think that attacking hunger, sleep, of course, malnutrition goes with hunger, but attacking those kind of things from a charitable standpoint is very, very important.
No, I love that. I was in a Uber, I guess it was the last winter, and I don't know what city I was in, but as we were driving, it kind of caught me off guard. The Uber driver slowed down, and he had like a bag of socks in the passenger seat. And as he would see somebody that was homeless and that was obviously very cold, like he would throw them a new pair of socks. I thought, wow, like that didn't take much effort. But that probably blessed that person that day, that really needed those. But yeah, putting a can of food in there or something, that's would be pretty simple for most of us as well. So that's a neat thought.
And the thing with that too is that the beauty of that, of what you're talking about, the socks or tuna or anything like that, is that it doesn't cost millions upon millions of dollars to do. I mean, so often we make the mistake of equating charity and giving the charity with, oh, I need to give away at least $1,000 or $10,000. Or I need to contribute $20,000, $50,000 to have my name up on the wing of this new hospital. But it doesn't take that much, particularly when you're just starting off economically or in business. You don't need vast sums of money. You can start small, and that builds the habit so that when you do get to the point that you can be contributing those vast sums, you're already primed mentally and in the habit of doing it. So it's just natural for you.
So Nick, how can the guests get in touch with you and learn more about getting their book started?
Sure. The best place to go would be our website, which is contentcore.net. And you spell that CONTENTCORPS.net, N-E-T. Contentcore.net would be the best place.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.